Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Urban Land Institute of Northwest Arkansas's Attainable Housing Series. This is part 4, a Leaders Roundtable. I'm your host, Wes Creglow, and I am the Northwest Arkansas Coordinator for the Urban Land Institute. Let's begin with a few housekeeping notes. First, we are recording this presentation and we will make it available for reviewing in the coming days through our website and various social media channels. Next, we beg your forgiveness in the event of a technical mishap. For example, if myself or one of the other speakers fall off of the call, just give us a few minutes and we'll get right back on. Finally, we encourage audience members to keep your video feeds off and your screen in speaker mode. That way you will ensure you get a video feed of the person speaking, but also preserve as much of your screen's real estate for the content on the slides. When we move to the roundtable, we'll turn to gallery mode, and that way you can get equal screens for each person's video feed on the roundtable here. So before I introduce our roundtable participants for the day, let me introduce you to a little bit more about the Urban Land Institute. ULI is the oldest and largest network of cross-disciplinary real estate and land use experts in the world. ULI is our members. Through our members' dedication to the mission and their shared expertise, ULI has been able to set standards of excellence in development practice. Established in 1936, the Institute today represents the entire spectrum of land use and development disciplines. The Institute has long been recognized as one of the most respected sources of objective information in urban planning, growth, and development, thanks in large part to its members' knowledge, experience, and active involvement in the organization and their communities. ULI relies heavily on the experience of its members. It is through member involvement and information resources that ULI has been able to set standards of excellence in development practice. District councils deliver the ULI mission at the local level. We engage local members through developing various ULI priority programs, hosting educational forums, and convening special events. And one of those educational forums is the reason we're all here today. Housing affordability has become an increasing concern nationally and here in the Northwest Arkansas region as demand has bounced back following the Great Recession. A largely untold chapter in the story of America's housing affordability challenge is the shrinking share of modestly priced, newly constructed for-sale homes, what we ULI call attainable housing. Over the last 3 weeks in this series, we've heard from national and regional speakers. We've discussed the rapid rise of home costs here in Northwest Arkansas and many of the drivers associated with that rise. We've discussed how architectural typologies are evolving to support affordability challenges and support new breeds of buyers. We've discussed emerging trends in neighborhood design and learned about unique financing models that make homeownership possible. And we've discussed the role of transportation costs as a share of total housing costs. At our roundtable today are a group of Northwest Arkansas leaders who can speak to each of these topics with a fluency that only comes from decades of experience and understanding. The intent of this conversation is to view the issues of supply, sales, and policy through the lens of practitioners. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Garner Stoll, Director of Development Services for the City of Fayetteville, Mr. Cope Gracie, Owner and President, Gracie Built Homes, and Bill Burkhart, Owner and President, Burkhart Construction, and current Alderman for Ward 3, Seat 2 and on the Bentonville City Council. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. And I'm going to scan our attendees, make sure we didn't have any last-minute arrivals. We didn't. Please forgive us if Don McNaughton and if Taylor Marquess join us a little bit late. I know that they were going to try to get by today, but as things go, we're all very busy, especially right now. And so we beg your understanding if they don't come by or drop by a little bit late. But Taylor Marquess, the Vice President of Operations at Riverwood Homes and current Vice President of the Northwest Arkansas Home Builder Association, and Don is currently the President of the Northwest Arkansas Board of Realtors. Hopefully they'll join us shortly. But gentlemen, let's go ahead and jump on in right now. And would love to hear from you on a range of topics that we've discussed and explored over the last 3 weeks and kind of get your feedback on some of those. Let's start with better defining attainable housing. So for the sake of this series and ULI in general, we define attainable housing as that which exists for sale unsubsidized, to the, generally speaking, the middle class market. That's between 80 and 120% of area household median income. Where are we right now? Well, our area median income for Northwest Arkansas as a whole is right at 58,000, and some cities are as high as about 70,000. But generally speaking, we're talking about a household median income in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. Is a pretty safe estimate, especially in the 4 big cities. What does that mean for home affordability to that middle class buyer? That puts a house somewhere in the $250,000 range. When we calculate in 30-year mortgage costs at current 4%, we look at property taxes and homeowners insurance, not counting maintenance costs, not counting transportation and energy costs, just basically the purchase and tax and insurance on that home. We're looking at about a $250,000 house that meets a 30% threshold of total household costs, total housing costs. What we know about attainable housing, or at least what we've learned, is that the share of this price point is shrinking. I want to visit with you all about why it might be shrinking, kind of get your thoughts on that, and a way forward to ensure that supply meets the demand. Because what we know about demand is that there's broad appeal at this price point. Not to suggest that there's not broad appeal and plenty of supply below or above this, but we know that everyone from first-time buyers to empty nesters and everything in between desire that firm middle price point at roughly $250,000 for our market area. So something else we explored over the last 3 weeks is how to get there. We acknowledge that there's a shrinking share of homes being constructed at this price point, and we want to investigate how to increase that share. It's critically important right now because we know that Northwest Arkansas is one of the fastest growing regions in the United States. We can expect, according to the Regional Planning Commission, we can expect somewhere close to 500,000 new residents moving to Northwest Arkansas in the next 30 years. At 2.6 people right now per household, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, that puts us somewhere near 180 to 185,000 new housing units over the next 30 years. So the key question we're trying to answer here in this series is, how do we ensure that an appropriate share, a plurality, in fact, of what we're going to build over the next 30 years is affordable to the middle class buyer? Again, those between 80 and 120% of area median income. I'll continue to set a primer here as we look at the Benton and Washington County average price of homes. And I would love to get some feedback from you on this, gentlemen, as we look at the last, where are we here, 15 years. And so, you know, this information came from during episode 1 in our series. Mervyn Jebaraj of the Walton School of Business, Center for Business and Economic Research, demonstrates that we see rapid rise, rapid and consistent growth approaching that $250,000 mark. And we see that without much change, it's going to continue its rapid rise. Curious what your reaction to this. Bill, as a builder yourself, when you see this rapid rise in property value, what's your reaction? Or in home sales value, what's your reaction? Oh, check your mute, gentlemen. If y'all want to go ahead and pop off mute, and the 3 of you all can stay off mute, and we can just make this a conversation. You're welcome, gentlemen, to jump in, and anytime there's a moment, obviously respectful interruptions, but feel free to just be conversational. So I'll start with you, Bill. What's your reaction when you see this?
Well, I think it's a direct correlation to what we've seen over the last 10 years. The lack of production, lack of supply of lots, lack of labor, all has really built this perfect storm for pricing. And that's why you're not seeing a lot of effect now, even during this crisis that we're in currently, because it's all built up to this level. Mm-hmm. So whether it's labor cost, construction cost, lot cost, development cost, infrastructure cost, pure lack of production to keep up with the supply, all of this has really grouped together to create this price inflation. And this includes the chart that you see, used homes, which as we start to tear down more and more, this is going to accentuate this situation. Because as we tear down some of the older homes, the newer ones are being built the average in Bentonville is 350, 377. So you're not replacing that older stock, which is in the numbers that you see here. So the chart, in my opinion, would probably be much steeper as we move forward, or at least the lower income homes of the used homes will drop off.
Cope, what are your thoughts on the rapid rise?
I think it's something we've seen year over year, obviously, and it's really driven just by land costs. And back to what Bill said, I mean, we're having to buy houses, tear down houses just to build attainable housing. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be the norm going forward, is just more dense areas, more traditional neighborhoods, and you're going to be a little bit closer to your neighbors going forward.
Yeah. Let's jump in here. We're gonna get some more evidence from Mervyn on lot costs, kind of the supply and demand associated with lots costs. We did hear from Christopher Tomey, the executive director of the Terwilliger Center for Housing at the ULI mothership up in Washington, D.C. And based on what they're seeing up there in the research side of the house, there are really four key drivers here. We definitely see that land costs is one of those. And I think in the next slide, you're going to see Mervyn further support that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as builders yourselves. I'd love to hear your thoughts on construction costs. How are things right now in Northwest Arkansas with regard to labor and materials? Bill?
For us, we've had a steady increase, not just in labor, but in the material cost. Recently, the framing materials have dropped, but in general, with all the tariffs and the shortages that we've had over the last couple of years, our material costs have gone up. Our lumber is just now stabilizing.
Cope, kind of the same for you?
Definitely the same thing. I've seen a little bit more increase in just general labor or skilled labor with that. There's just some of this construction going on with this Arkansas that you've seen really. The quality of labor people have just gone up in pricing a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Garner, when you look at this list as a government representative who has experience in a lot of markets challenged by affordability, those of you all don't know, Garner has worked in planning and development staff at the city level in cities like Lawrence, Kansas, and Boulder, Colorado, and Austin, Texas. So he's no newbie to affordability challenges in rapid growing markets. Garner, when you see regulatory costs associated with fees in the entitlement process, from a government leader point of view, what does that mean to you?
Well, Wes, first of all, thank you for convening this discussion. It's an important discussion, and I can't imagine a better organization than the Urban Land Institute to convene it in Northwest Arkansas.
Thank you.
Just from a global standpoint, one thing I have concluded over my career, that housing attainability, affordability, whatever you want to call it, absolutely has to be a yes and conversation and not a yes no conversation. And what I mean by that is we need to try to meet the demand. We are in a supply and demand situation. We need to meet the demand at all price points. So if somebody proposes to do an appropriate, expensive housing development, local government should say yes, because they're the ones that create the surpluses that allow us to do other things for attainable housing, and they support our school system, and they make our community livable. So it needs to be a yes and conversation. We, for one reason or another, still take too much time and probably make it more difficult than necessary to get to entitlement. Although in Fayetteville, we're working very hard on making sure that we don't do that. Fayetteville is, I think, a little different from the other communities because the cost per square foot for the neighborhoods in and around downtown and around the university are almost double what they are in the newly developing areas on the perimeter. So that really adds some special challenges.
Yeah, like hyper local matters. Bill, are you seeing that further north as well? Evidence of the kind of that hyper local land costs, varying by where you are at proximity to amenities and the like.
Certainly, the downtown core and downtown edge have seen an explosion here in Bentonville, as the other downtown areas have. And it's pretty close to double what you see in the outside of those areas, still within the incorporated boundaries. But it comes naturally because we have so scarce properties available. And now that the demand is there, it's obviously going to push up the pricing. The densities matter, the zoning matters. And we're just now really getting a handle on what kind of zonings that looks like in some of the towns. And we're just now exploring some of those creative ideas.
Cope, you build throughout the state of Arkansas. I'm curious what your thoughts are about government regulation, the costs, but also just your experience with navigating the entitlement process in various cities that you build in. What is consistent? What is so variable that it becomes disruptive to your business model? And in general, what are your thoughts on how the entitlement process, getting your zoning, your subdivision, your permitting approved, how does that process impact your delivery costs?
I think the biggest challenge with us is just each city has a different true process of actually what's required from a rezone process and just barriers to just obtain zoning that you want for a project in need. We're building currently in North Little Rock as well as Northwest Arkansas. And North Little Rock has really taken a lot of great strides in just trying to rezone their downtown core into a lot of variety of mixed use. And they've been on board with just you bring us a project and we'll try to figure out how to make it work for you guys. And that's been really helpful from our standpoint of just trying to really build attainable and affordable town and projects in that area. We're going to try to bring to Northwest Arkansas as well. It's just a little bit more challenging to get the zoning and the density needed in certain areas.
So don't let me put words in your mouth, but it sounds like what you're suggesting is that in North Little Rock, they see themselves as a little more of a partner in helping the process along.
They're definitely a partner, and they'll walk you through the process hand by hand. And we've had a little bit more difficulties getting those attainable projects approved in Northwest Arkansas.
Thank you. It's good to know. Back to lots. So Mervyn supplied these to us during episode 1. And Bill, you mentioned supply and demand of available real estate. And here's what it looks like. On the left side, you see Benton County. And that left column, and on the right side, we see Washington County. Larger cities are at the top, and the smaller cities are at the bottom. But ultimately, the story is the same, gentlemen. We're experiencing right now a rapid dearth of available, ready-to-build on lots. And I would like to hear from you on this. What do you feel, why are we seeing fewer subdivisions being platted right now? Garner, what are you seeing come across your desk in Fayetteville with regards to new plats?
We're seeing healthy activity in all kinds of development applications. In fact, since COVID shut down, it has shot up. I think our planning commission was in business until 1:30 this morning, trying to talk through some of the applications. We're not seeing any let up on building permits. I've been monitoring that on a weekly basis, and the demand is still strong. We're expecting that to perhaps end, but it hasn't yet. Mm-hmm. We recognize we do have a shortage of developable lots. I think we have a little better supply than the other communities in Washington County, but those are rapidly being absorbed, but developers are moving ahead with preliminary plats. So we should, I don't know, we'll keep up. I think we will. I still expect the demand to drop.
The demand for
new homes. I just can't imagine with what's happening to unemployment and the uncertainty nationally, and just the unknowns.
That's
not
interesting.
Affecting the market. I think it will affect it.
Do you see that? Let's explore that for a minute, Garner. Do you see that as a short-term disruption, say, 2 years or less? Do you see that as midterm, 3 to 5, or even longer? How long do you see that, in your mind's eye, how long do you see that slowdown sustaining?
I guess I'm just not enough of a seer to see that at all, but
Bill?
I can't imagine it not affecting the housing market. I think past recessions always affect the housing market. Although the thing that is unique to this one is that the interest rates are way down.
Mm-hmm.
So that should help.
Bill, what's your
people
take?
really going to jump and buy a new house if they're out of a job?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great point, Garner. It's one that I hadn't considered exploring here, but I would like to take a moment. Bill, what's your take on that?
Well, I respectfully disagree. If you look at the charts that we have on the screen and the charts over history, our lack of production over the last decade and a half, we averaged about 1.2 million units nationally. We've only averaged about 600,000. Our demand in Northwest Arkansas has stayed constant and grown, as well as our job base. So if you look at the charts, what you're seeing is the result of that. You're seeing less people developing, more people moving in, less lots available, and less people to build the houses. I mean, you have to remember we lost half our workforce in 2008, 2010. So I see the supply of lots continuing to dwindle or stay flat or slightly above the level where you see shortage of homes, monthly supply hovering around. It might bump to 6.5 months supply just over the next month or two, but I think you'll see that drop back down to 5.5 months, which is fantastic, 5 months. I see continued pressure on housing prices, and our demand is through the roof. It hasn't slowed down one bit.
Help me understand, Bill, if you posit the theory that demand is strong but supply is low. Why is the supply side of the economy not responding if the demand is there? Why are we not seeing far more plats being dropped for greenfield development and ultimately getting guys like Cope busy building a lot of houses? Why is the supply not commensurate to the demand?
Well, I'm not disagreeing with Bill on the long term. I was just asking whether there's going to be a temporary blip.
Yeah.
I just saw the Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning Commission sent out the population estimates July 1st, 2019 yesterday, and we're definitely still growing. We're growing. In fact, Fayetteville is leading the charge.
Yep.
What was your question? I apologize.
So what if I'm understanding you correctly, Bill, your sense is that over the long term, supply is just not rising to meet the level of demand here in Northwest Arkansas. And I was just curious to what you attribute that.
Well, I think that if you look back at 05 and before, you had a lot of speculative development. You had a lot of retail lots that were being sold to different builders. Lots were available for retail sale. There was a tremendous amount of supply of those types of lots in several different price points. Mm-hmm. What you see now is developer owned. You see people developing their own lots for their own production, limiting the supply of retail availability. Mm-hmm. And so what that does is whatever the capacity is of production for those individuals is the maximum capacity you have. Mm-hmm. If you look at the report from the Northwest Housing Task Force, our capacity under current growth rates cannot keep up. So if we even reflect our production and add inflation to it and say we grow our production at our growth rate, we're still tens of thousands of units behind in 20 years. So we can't, right now at our current production rate, we can't produce our way out of this. Certainly not in the 80 to 120% of area median income, and certainly under 80% of area median income is almost impossible at this point.
Well, that's exactly why we're having this conversation today, Bill, because I think you and I both see the same writing on the wall. And I think it's important to start having this conversation, because if we cannot increase production at this price point, at this middle class attainable price point, what we're going to see is the middle class purchasing up what is available in a lot of existing housing stock. And then we get in the downward spiral of that downward pressure on the market, which makes it even more difficult for low to moderate income and below earners to even secure a roof over their head. So I'm glad to hear you bring that up, Bill. I think that's very topical to why we're here this month. Cope, before we move on to talk about some of the product solutions and what can be delivered to market and what some of you all are doing right now to help meet the demand, do you have any insights as far as where you see the Northwest Arkansas market going with regards to available new plats, lots available to build on?
I don't know if I can truly speak directly to that, Wes. I'm not a land developer. Typically, everything we do is a lot more infill or small, denser projects. So when it comes to actual land developing itself, I think that's truly Bill or probably even Taylor, if he's back on yet, a conversation that they can speak to.
Great.
That's definitely more in line with what they do.
Well, let's use this as a segue to start talking about some product solutions, because I know you and Bill both have come up with some unique things. Want to look first at, this is some information from Adam Ducker, who spoke to us in the second episode. Adam is senior managing partner at RCL Co., which is a real estate consulting firm. They have a huge research arm there. And recently last year, they worked with ULI to do some survey of the building community, of ULI members that work in the building community, and then broader membership. And what we discovered in this research is that consumer solutions, based on the builders' opinion, what builders are thinking about consumers is that in order to achieve lower price points, middle class attainability, builders see that as limiting community amenities and basically pushing out to cheaper land. Let's get these homes out on cheaper land, and that's how we're going to bat on the cost. And any amenities from sidewalks to neighborhood parks to access to broader services out in the region, that's where you're going to find your cost savings. Builders are not under the assumption that people want smaller homes or smaller lot sizes. But then you look at the consumer preferences on the right, and what you see is consumers desiring a mix of houses, shops, and businesses nearby. And this is for both, you'll see households incomes over 100,000. I really want you to focus on the green though, household incomes of 50 to 100,000. That's kind of that middle class price point. What we see are those residents that desire to be in a city near a mix of offices, apartments, and shops. We see a majority there versus higher income earners, and then much lower on rural, small town, and resort areas. So if buyers are showing a willingness to be near a mix of shops and businesses, or in urban areas as opposed to suburban areas, then maybe we need to examine what sort of products we're delivering, because by and large the conventional model takes advantage of less expensive land on the periphery of town, and very often you don't get the amenities like the access to services. So let's look at some of the solutions as presented. Again, this is the RCLCO's data, or what they're recommending as far as like the 21st century model. These are some strategies that they're seeing, some best practices, in fact, that they're seeing emerging throughout the country. That are a little bit unconventional. They're not the traditional single-use, single-family home on a relatively large lot out on the edge of town. Instead, they're smaller houses, many times with higher finishes. They include value housing. Adam spoke about value housing, especially from building efficiencies with regards to material and labor costs, access to financing, but basically how many even architectural typologies, how many forms can we replicate? How can I keep my costs down through the building process and pass that value on to the buyer? We talked about the missing middle, and ensuring that consumers had access to many housing types, not just large apartment complexes or single family, which conventionally through much of the late 20th century, those have been the plurality of products delivered. And then some unique kind of really forward-leaning things here. We see some recommendations on high density detached and what they call cluster housing. And so I'm curious, we're going to dig in a little bit deeper on a couple of these, but I'm curious right now what your thoughts are on the two slides we've looked at, both with builder and consumer sentiment, and then some of these recommendations. Garner, let's start with you. Where do you sense consumer sentiment right now in the city of Fayetteville?
Well, our planning commission just approved a cluster housing development on Old Farmington, which is 31 homes of between 500 and 600 square feet, right next to where there are similar homes already completed that are seem to be very successful. So that's a small amount, but we're certainly seeing that being built in Fayetteville. About 2 years ago, our city council passed a very almost unregulated ADU, accessory dwelling unit ordinance. What it does, it allows, if you have a single family home, you can add 2 accessory dwelling unit as long as the combined square footage isn't above 1,200 square foot. One can be detached and one can be attached. And we're not getting they're not breaking down our doors to build an accessory dwelling unit. We had about a handful built before that ordinance was passed. And last year we're in the mid 20s. But if you look at some of the product types, we have I can show you an accessory dwelling unit that is under construction right now. Well, a new house with 2 accessory dwelling units. The new house is 1,200 square foot. The attached accessory dwelling unit is 600. The detached is 500 off the alley. A wonderful mix. The neighbors seem to be happy with it. It's right across the street from where the mayor lives. He seems to be happy with it. So I think it's anemic. It's not like they're breaking down our doors to build tiny houses or accessory dwelling unit, but I see a bright future there. And it's not going to meet all the demand in Fayetteville. The big demand is still out for startup families out by Rupel Road, and they want to be affordable. They want it to be utility efficient, and they want to be next somewhere where there's a school.
Yep.
Cope, that's still the biggest demand.
Cope, what are you seeing in what you're delivering right now in terms of buyer response? Are they responding to any of these trends, like being near to the city center, or mixed income neighborhoods, access to amenities and transportation options, smaller homes, in fact, various finish levels? What are you seeing in terms of how your buyers are responding, Cope?
Sure, Wes. So I can bestly say that they're responding to all 3 of those. I mean, people definitely want to be close to amenities, so they want to be in downtown. They want to be close to transportation, bike trails, restaurants, food, bars, that whole thing. So people ever want. And they're really giving up a lot of their space. So they're taking smaller houses. They're taking living closer to neighbors, so more dense neighborhoods, things like that. Mm-hmm. One thing they're not really sacrificing on is just quality of finishes. They're still wanting a very quality upgraded finish. With today's Pinterest housing, they see all these amazing finishes and they really want to follow and live that lifestyle. And they'll give up more space and just smaller bedrooms, smaller bathrooms, and still have quality entertaining space for all their friends to come over.
And do you feel like as a builder, do you feel like there's a sweet spot in there on the product? Smaller lot, smaller home, bigger life sort of thing. So whether that's access to outside culture or it's access to higher finish work inside the home, that's in often cases for middle class affordable housing. That's not what we've been building for most of the last couple of generations. It's a new product that you're describing here. Do you feel like there's a sweet spot in the market as far as earning a living, delivering that product? Do you feel like there's enough demand out there for that new product to basically incentivize more people to build it?
Today, no. I feel like as the years progress, yes, there will be a lot more people that want to still maintain that lifestyle, live to close amenities, and I believe in the future it's going to be a way that everybody wants to live in and not have to be inside the apartment style neighborhoods.
Let's jump in here. I want to look at the basically reinforcement of this theory here from the National Association of Home Builders. And in last year's report here, Diversifying Housing Options with Smaller Lots on Smaller Homes, they came to the same conclusion. When you look at the executive summary in the first few pages of this, I just pulled out some of these bullet comments. But this is what they're describing, Cope, exactly. And you can see here what they see as a way forward in support of smaller homes. Some of the things that they do recognize, though, is the challenge of streamlined entitlements. In many cases, this report describes that in many cases, cities' ordinances, the regulations associated with entitlements they're not developed, frankly. Those zoning and subdivision ordinances are not constructed in a way to support the type of house that you're talking about delivering here, Cope. So it makes the entitlement process challenging. Also challenges associated with a public that is unfamiliar with these unconventional product solutions. And so when a missing middle product or an ADU product or cluster homes, you take a relatively reasonable sized lot in the older part of town and you put in 4 or 5 or 6 homes on it, and the public can react out of fear. Frankly, it's just a lack of understanding. What do you see in Cope? You do a lot of that infill type of stuff. What do you see in terms of working with the city on unique projects like that, and what sort of reaction do you get at the public hearing from the NIMBYs of the world who just don't understand?
Initially, it was a lot of negative. They were very concerned about just the overall look and feel for higher density in those areas. I think now that they've actually understood and see kind of how it actually plays out, that we've had some really good support.
And what sort of recommendations can you give? Like, what, through your experience in doing infill projects on these more modern product solutions, what sort of recommendations can you make either to officials like Bill and Garner, Bill on city council and Garner is a staff member, a staff leader, or to communities, can be community members to help coach their residents to not be opposed to everything? What, in your experiences, what sort of advice could you provide?
I think just the biggest thing is providing examples that have been successful. That's what's helped us out, is going to different cities, say go to Austin or go to Charleston, South Carolina, bringing that traditional neighborhood concept back and just providing examples of how it's been successful, even with higher density. We've had really good success with just bringing cities on board once they understand that you're not just packing in an apartment that's got 50 to 300 units in there. You're still providing a single family house that is actually attainable and affordable for most people. And I think that's the biggest driver, is that attainable housing is always going to be needed in that area.
Well, let's look at some examples here. So Cope, you can see some of your products on the left, and Bill, we can see Allencroft on the right here. Bill, let's start with you. We've spoken a little bit about some of the products that Cope is delivering here that we see on the left. These are some projects going on in Rogers right now. And we'll hear a little bit more about them. I'll let you tell us about these in Rogers, Cope, in a second. But Bill, let's look at the neighborhood first. So Allencroft, Bill, I think you said you built this in the late 1990s. This is just on the north side of Tiger Boulevard, a stone's throw, frankly, literally a stone's throw from the Slaughter Pen Trail Network and not much further to downtown Bentonville. This neighborhood, I'll allow you to talk about some of the unique things that we see in terms of the character, the design of this neighborhood. But I want to start by saying that it is consistently, it continues to be consistently attainable. I know that because my wife and I looked at a couple of houses in here. They were just bought faster than we could make an offer a couple of years back. And I was looking as recently as this morning on some of the more recent sales and the current listings here in Allencroft. And they continue. These are, Bill, let me just applaud you for a minute. These are wonderful, right-sized homes at roughly 1,800 to 2,200 square feet by and large, and they're still selling for about $250,000, some a little more, some a little less. Talk to us, Bill, about your design, kind of the methodology that drew you to this style of design, and why you think it continues, how you pulled it off at the attainable level first 20 years ago, and why you think it continues to be attainable to this day, given the vast increase to cost that we've seen throughout the rest of Bentonville in this area.
Well, thank you, Wes. I think people of all income levels desire to have a neighborhood, desire to be in town, desire to be part of all the activities, desire to be close to their jobs. People don't want to drive 30 minutes. They don't want to have their housing and transportation cost over 50%. So when you look at neighborhoods like this is a traditional neighborhood design. I'm currently doing another one in Bentonville right now in the development phase, which is kind of this 2.0. But this mixes housing types. it's all based on the individual, pedestrians, getting to know your neighbors, passive parks, areas to congregate, really to make it feel like a community. When I first looked at this, what I saw going on in Bentonville and other places, people pull into their garages, close their door, they don't know anybody. Lots getting bigger and bigger outside, further out of town to get the pricing. People didn't feel like they were part of the city or the core of the city. So back to your first discussion is, why are people wanting that at these different income levels? Why shouldn't they? They should be able to live and participate in all of the activities that all the other demographics enjoy and participate in, and show through these types of designs, which allow for that feeling of neighborhood, but it also allows the density to be higher. And so this was the first of its type. We had to revise some zoning to get there. Since then, there's a lot of different zonings, but this density was 6 units to the acre. Currently, I'm able to get about 6.5 under a similar design concept with different housing types and sizes of lots. But that, as far as outside of the downtown core, that's about as much as we can get right now. Mm-hmm. So while we sold those in the mid hundreds and now they're 250, the same product would be 250, 280 now. So we're still missing that 80%, around that 80% area median income and less in this product, but it is a desirable product. And I think you see more and more people looking for it, smaller houses, quality design, and a quality of place. And it's the experience of the place. Experiences is what matters now, not the house, the structure.
Thank you, Bill, very much. Cope, talk to us about what's going on in Rogers right now. Tell us about these that we see on the left side of the screen.
So it's an infill project we're working on in downtown Rogers. We basically bought 2 existing standard size lots. They replatted into actual 7 lots that are 28 to 30 feet wide to build a little bit more of a traditional style house. And we did it in 2 phases. We did one, just kind of test the market, see really how the consumer was going to respond to it, which is the bottom picture on the left. There is our first phase of it. It's just a small, it's a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 1,600 square feet house that we did. No garages. We did kind of runway parking out front, which surprisingly actually was very well received. People really liked the parking out front piece of it, just from a look standpoint. The phase 2, basically, we just modified the design a little bit to give it a little bit more cleaner, modern look, and add a single car garage as well. These are just now starting to finish up construction. We've been delayed a little bit with all the rain and weather we've had. It's been a challenging on a tighter site. With any bit of rain, everything stays wet for a while. So the top 3 basically hopefully we'll be finishing up the end of this next month, and they'll be hitting the market as well. Price point still around that 260 point in the downtown area. 3 blocks, 4 blocks from downtown Rogers. We feel like it's going to be successful. We've had quite a bit of interest in them already, and then they'll be hitting. But it's been a challenge. I mean, the biggest deal is just finding the land available to do it, and infill is probably really what we focus on more in Northwest Arkansas, is that piece of it. I'm doing similar projects to this in downtown North Little Rock in an actual pocket community called the Porches at Rockwater. And it's a traditional neighborhood as well. It has a lot of common space, back to Bill's reference. So people want to live outside their house. They want to be outside. They don't want to come home, shut the garage door, and just stay inside the house. So if you can give them some amenities out front to hang out in a fire pit, somewhere to just hang out, people really like that and enjoy just being around the neighbors.
Do you feel like it's possible to do this style project, Cope, in Bentonville and Fayetteville right now, or have land acquisition costs near downtown just exceeded your ability to deliver this project at an attainable price point?
I think Fayetteville definitely is attainable when you get back some of that cluster housing Garner was referencing piece. So you're getting a little bit higher density there and the small footprints. I've avoided Bentonville just as a whole, just because land costs is never penciled for us as a builder.
Important to know. So the density, for you, it just all comes down to density. You can absorb the land if you can just get the higher densities through.
Absolutely. I mean, we're working on a lot of projects where we're actually going and focusing more on attached townhome style living just to get higher density. We've got one that's recently been approved in North Little Rock that's actually 18 units per acre, but it is all attached single family living.
Outstanding. I want to take a moment here. This was a question that I had specifically for Taylor. Unfortunately, I think he's terribly busy today. I want to talk about efficiencies, building efficiencies. This is something that ULI and RCLCO both identified in their research last year. Efficiency, basically how many of these costs can we buy down through scale, effectively economies of scale. Here's what we're talking about. And we know we have large developers in our region that are probably very good at it. Medium-sized developers, I'm not certain, and small developers, I just don't know. Bill and Cope, talk to us about how the economies of scale, how building efficiencies can, how do you leverage those economies of scale in the projects that you two pull off, and how big of a share do you see this source of efficiency playing in the cost, the final cost of the product you deliver? Bill, you want to go first?
Sure, thank you, Wes. It's obvious that the scalability and the efficiency of larger production helps tremendously. First of all, we're in a very tight labor market, and if you're able to control the labor base and keep your prices in certain constraints, it greatly helps your ability to be predictable in your budgets. You're also able to negotiate better pricing over multiple units than you are individual units, as in a retail setup. You're also able to do lots as scale. In other words, because we're producing our own lots, we're able to bring our lot costs down and not purchase those in retail form. So we're able to be, through the production of scale and producing our own inventory for our own building, also gives us a little better cost advantage by producing our own lots than trying to pay retail. Obviously, we'd be paying somebody else's profit. Mm-hmm. So, and most of us that are producing our own lots, really that is for the production of our homes if you're in home production. Like the one I'm currently doing, that is specifically to be able to produce my product, our home product that we believe in.
Cope, how big of a role does this style of efficiency play in the smaller footprint infill projects? Do you feel like you can access enough saved costs with building efficiencies like this?
West is definitely a challenge. I mean, when you're only talking, 5 or 6 units at a time, and then just an infill project, the economies of scale sometimes are not in your favor.
Yeah.
What I find really more difficult is you're competing as a small developer. You're competing against some of the larger ones for labor and skilled labor at that. And I can definitely say my skilled labor pricing, just labor in general, has gone up, and I think part of it's due to I'm not developing those 50 to 200 lot subdivisions right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's a struggle when it comes to any small town developer wants to work on infill projects. You're going to have a lot of challenges working through that factor.
Let's talk about missing middle. Missing middle real quick, in particular condos. And I want to try to wrap this up in about 2 minutes and give the last 5 minutes if there's any questions from the audience. If there's not, I can definitely circle back and ask a couple more. Make sure we use our full hour. Condos. We build almost no condos. We know that a generation ago, condo market was hot nationwide. I can even drive around Northwest Arkansas and see, especially here in Fayetteville, I can see innumerable examples of for sale attached housing condos that were built in the 1970s and 1980s primarily. Yet we see almost none of it. And it's not just here in Northwest Arkansas. We see almost zero for sale attached throughout the country. What are your thoughts on that? Garner, do you want to start us off? And you have, like, from your vantage point, do you have any theories as to why we don't see single family attached for sale in the marketplace right now?
I suspect the majority of the reason is the market, but we have a glitch in Fayetteville that we're going to correct, which is for single family duplexes, we give an entire exemption from storm drainage and from tree preservation. So developers in infill locations choose to build single family duplexes, and it incentivizes extra walls. It's just crazy, but we're going to correct that. But even when we make that correction, I still don't know if we're going to get row houses and condos like we used to.
Yeah. Bill, what's your take on the condo market? Why have we not seen condos the way that we used to a generation ago?
Secondary financing. I think you're seeing a lot of townhomes that is actually a different definition of condominiums. Condominiums can be stacked on each other. What you're seeing now is people splitting townhomes. And in my new subdivision, we'll be doing the same thing. And there's an active market for that. We just finished an entire senior housing townhome setup that we had to convert from condos to townhomes so we could sell it as individual lots for secondary financing purposes. So I think the condo, the true definition of a condo is simply secondary market financing. It's hard to explain. It's hard to understand through appraisals. So I think there's a great place for it. It's just difficult to do. So if you're going more than one story and you can't really call it a townhome by splitting it down the middle of those units, then it gets much more complicated, and the risk level is too high currently right now if you don't have a secondary market to provide financing for a lot of these folks.
Cope, is what you're building in North Little Rock, are those going to be for sale, those townhomes you've got planned down there?
That is correct, Wes. The townhomes in North Little Rock will be actual attached townhomes that will be for sale. And we're actually working on a few for the Rogers area as well that are currently in concept design.
And how's
I mean, it all comes down to financing. Condos, you just can't get financing for a number of reasons.
Interesting. That's almost worth its own episode right there in the series. That we've got a potential product solution that can't be brought to market due to some other mechanism. I'm going to go ahead and press pause on me talking, and I want to make sure that my audience is allowed to unmute themselves. I want to give several minutes here at the end to anyone in the audience who wants to unmute their microphone, or if you'd prefer to type it, you're welcome to use the chat feature. But I want to give an opportunity for folks to jump in here before I ask any more questions. Let's give 5 or 10 seconds here. All right, see some chat. Okay, we got a question here about home size. I see, would love to hear from the panel on what size, number of bedrooms, and size of development the panel sees working right now. So back during a little bit of a brief backstory here, during episodes 1 and 2 of this, we heard some research about average household size and how the average household size in the United States has been shrinking now for more than a generation. We're seeing smaller and smaller households, yet home sizes in many cases are getting larger. 3 and 4 bedroom homes still dominate the marketplace. What's your position on what do you see being built is the sweet spot for home size right now? And then what is your position on kind of that imbalance in supply and demand throughout the country right now? Cope, you feel free to jump in.
Sure. I mean, so we're focusing mainly on just 3 bedroom, 2.5 bath, 16 to 1,900 square feet. Single family would be the traditional neighborhood, and the townhomes are going to be truly the attainable housing market for probably less than 200,000, and those are going to be back down to 12 to 1,300 square feet with a single car garage. Some might even have a 2-car garage, depending on layout.
Bill, home size relative to household size, what are you building right now? What do you see as the sweet spot for the consumer activity?
Well, in Bentonville, our average has stayed around 2,800 square feet. So they're quite large compared to what I'm building. Last several years, I'm in the same square footage as Cope. I'm doing the 1,600 to 2,000 square foot, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 2-car garage, high-end amenities, high-end quality. Matter of fact, the housing itself is shifting. The amount of rooms they're wanting is less, more openness, more of a courtyard environment. So smaller is working. A lot of single individuals, a lot of single women they're purchasing. One of the largest markets we have is single women of all demographics. I think that the size matters, and the sweet spot is going to be when everybody else is above you in the herd, that the market and the population is there for that 16 to 2,000 square foot, if you give them experiences and good high-end amenities.
Great input. I'm going to give another 5 or 10 seconds if anyone wants to come across chat for unmute. Okay, we have just about a minute left. And so at the end of our time here, Garner, why don't you take us out here and talk to us about what you see the long-term future of Northwest Arkansas, long after all of us are gone and we add these other 500,000 homes. How are we going to be living here in Northwest Arkansas, and what implications can we expect how the housing we build over the next 30 years to have on the region as a whole? Maybe impacts to transportation, impacts to energy, impacts to economy. Take us out with some theory here, Professor Stoll.
That was a big question. I think that we're going to see people living in a variety of house size. I think the house size thing is totally overblown, and we have to figure out a way to decouple price from square footage, because people want smaller houses with a lot of amenities and a lot of preferences in terms of location, but the real estate market is still driven by cost per square foot. And when you get to smaller houses, those costs per square foot are going to look high, and we have to figure out how to get past that. But I think generally Northwest Arkansas is in kind of the driver's seat. We have still relatively low costs. We have a high quality of life. We have great mobility. But we need to keep rebuilding our downtowns and keep the livability, the identity of each unique community going. And that's going to require adding some transit sometime. But I threw out some ideas. I'll let just end at that point. I think we're in a good position, and we will soon become a leader nationally in terms of livability and convenience.
Well, that's a very positive note to end on. I think those are encouraging words. So we will leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you very much for participating in the roundtable here, for closing out an eventful month of May where we discussed housing each one of these Wednesdays. I think this was the ideal way to end it. Thank you for being here, for joining us today here at ULI, and for providing your insights to this really powerful and important topic. Definitely drop by arkansas.uli.org and keep up on our next events. The month of June is already stacking up, so check us on the website for registration, follow us for news and updates on our social media channels, and reach out to me at any time if anyone has questions. To our audience, thank you. To our speakers, thank you as well, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. All my best to everyone. Bye-bye.